Dude, I'm reading such an interesting book. Oh, yes, and by the way, the background moves now.
A better you starts today.
I mean, I was always on Success Island. It's just that we were filming in studio in Success Island, and so it was stagnant. And now look at it. We're outside. We're moving up in the world. That's what this channel's all about. Make sure that you subscribe, because I really do think that we give out a lot of good advice and tips, because all it is me researching a bunch of stuff and my producer, and then we give you the best bits of it. The best in psychology, the best in self-help to make you better at getting your goals. We've also got a Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that later. In the meantime, I have something very, very interesting to talk about, and I'm going to get really, really paid out about. And fair enough, I deserve to be. I believe in ghosts. I can't help it. I can't help it. There is a book by Leslie Kean called Surviving Death. Now, this is the same woman that, before she wrote the book about UFOs, this is not a good start. I'm losing all my credibility. Before she wrote the book about UFOs, she was a New York Times investigative journalist, still is a New York Times investigative journalist. They didn't part ways. But through her investigative journalism, she came across the weird thing that the US government did have a UFO crash retrieval program that was running for the last 50 years. She was the first person to have ever proven that the whole time that the US government pretended that it wasn't taking UFOs seriously, apparently it was taking them very, very, very seriously. So what does that tell you? Huh? Now, I'm going to move on to something even more insane, like she did in her career. Because then after that, because that was just a fascinating book, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with it, I think that, honestly, anything about aliens or ghosts, count me in. Count me in. Anyway, her next book might be more your cup of tea, because it's really weird. It's either there's people that believe in both, obviously, but there's always a lot of people that are like, aliens, how could you believe in that? Oh my God, she woke up and she was a ghost and then came back into her body when she was on the operating table? Yeah, I knew it. I knew there was an afterlife. But her next one is just looking into the evidence of death survival, right? Which is what is called, in academic literature, did you know this? This is fascinating in itself. For 100 years, there has been a rich body of research from prominent universities into what happens in the afterlife. Do you get reincarnated into a pizza box? Are they right? The people on the LSD casualties, when they just think, oh, fuck, I'm a piece of orange. Like, does that happen to you? Obviously, brains are going to be interested in what is one of the biggest questions. I suppose those are the two biggest questions, aren't they? UFOs, are we alone? And then, what happens when I die? Do I go to heaven? Those are the big questions. How's this? How's this for a near-death experience story? To give you just a little taste of what's in this book. There is a tale of a woman that was born blind, never seen a colour in her life, gets hit in a car crash, I think. I really should have looked at the details again before blabbing my mouth, but something along those lines. All of a sudden, she wakes up. She's looking down on the operating table, and she's looking. That's the highlight here. She is looking. She can see. And she's freaking out because she's never seen in her life. And she's going, also floating around. That would also be quite discombobulating, even if you have seen things, I would imagine. And she notices that the woman that is on the table is her, because it has a wedding ring that is of the same pattern, that when she feels it, yeah, that's it. Anyway, she is able to recite exactly what the doctors were talking about for the next 2 hours. She's dead, mind you. Brain dead. You know, people that are just dead and then they just keep the lungs going and then sometimes they wake up. She was one of those cases. She was able to tell exactly what happened, as in how they got her back to life, the steps that went into that. So putting that tube down their throat and, I don't know, slapping their face. Ma'am, no, she's dead. We don't even have to put the machines in. All of that. She was able to recite it all. She was able to recite what was in the room. She's blind. She is blind. She is able to say what was in the room, what happened in what sequence. Dead for 2 hours. Now, I've heard people that say, yeah, okay, like the brain is able to... Death kind of happens where you die in interludes. So it's not an all-at-once thing. So I think that your brain continues on in some function for 10 minutes after. I can't remember exactly what it was. But this is 2 hours. This is 2 hours. And she comes to, she's able to recite all of it. That's just one of the stories. I want you to go out and read this book because, I don't know, I think that when you've read enough doom and gloom in your life and you've read enough self-help, yeah, I get it, I'm going to write down my goals, but I'm still not going to write my goals anyway. You need some other stuff to occupy your time. This is, I think, what happens to boomers. They go down this rabbit hole and then you start screaming about vaccines on the street and punching horses in the face. And I'm going down that path. But in the meantime, over and over again, regardless of whether it is a trick that the mind is doing, there's a ton of unbelievable stories in there. Because again, universities are quite interested in this subject, believe it or not. They're never going to get funding for it because imagine going to a dean and saying, I want to start a research institute where we figure out what happens when you die. Do ghosts exist? That's what I'm asking. No, I'm not going to get basic cable to watch the various Discovery Channel ghost inspector shows. They're interested in it. And so they have a lot of data that they have collected over the years. And some patterns are occurring. So I want you to go read that at your own time. But for self-help purposes, one thing that keeps coming back over and over again is when they died, it felt like they were still conscious. Consciousness existed. But it felt like their brain was working without their brain. That tripped me out for a second. Does that trip you out? Let me know in the comments. Does this idea trip you out? That your brain feels like this fleshy machine. I never thought about it before. I was never really conscious of my brain doing that. But they were saying that when you remove your spirit, in inverted commas, when that is removed, your brain, you can feel that everything that you have ever had has been encumbered in this fleshy, inefficient bug queen thing in Battle, whatever that movie was. You know the one I'm talking about? The one with the bugs. That one. They were saying that that is the feeling when you are unencumbered from it. That there is almost this mental conscious freedom that exudes. And then when you go back into your body, all right, I've got to start putting this in inverted commas. Just for nothing else, just to save my reputation that I've built up over the last 10 years. Going back into your body, you're at least aware of that. And for the rest of your life, your mind works better. That's an interesting little side note. The other big thing that I think is very interesting about this whole fiasco is that if you are one of these people, you're obviously not scared of death for the rest of your life. And as such, of not being scared of death for the rest of your life, you take way bigger risks. You also just think, nah, I'm not going to be doing that. Can you imagine the freedom? Can you imagine the freedom of thinking, all right, when I die, all that happens is I float around the hospital, I get myself some Dr. Pepper from the vending machine. Oh, no, I can't drink it anymore. This sucks. And then you go back into your body. Oh, okay. Well, that's just what happens when you die. You float around. You get to visit the pyramids if you want to. Whatever. That's what these people seem to think happens. I'll tell you who else seems to think it happened. Albert Einstein and Steve Jobs, when they died, both of them came back. They're kind of dithering in and out of consciousness, and it's beautiful. So, something is happening in the brain at the very least. But it is my point as to why Christians are usually quite successful in life. It's usually why they are able to endure a hell of a lot more than we are. It always comes back to this whole idea of abdicating yourself from mortality, from there being this game over. There's other ways to do it. There are other ways. There are ways of, like, for instance, you can believe in a cause so much that you are willing to die to extend that cause. That's one way of doing it. It sounds pretty extreme and psycho, but the whole thing is to get that kind of feeling of, like, your ambitions going beyond, is this going to make me feel comfortable or not in the moment? Imagine if you started to think for a second that you are just going to be in eternal bliss for the rest of your life. Well, we know what happens when that's the case. You're willing to blow yourself up. You can endure a hell of a lot more when you take this, what are we going to call it? Cloud pill. When you're cloud pilled, the amount of crap that you're able to deal with, it just goes through the roof. It just goes through the roof. So my other big question to you is, given that this is the scenario, how do you start abdicating that into your own psychology? Because I've got another guy that I know that apparently he got this like map that was revealed of like the next 14 years of his life from some psychic. And again, it doesn't matter if it was real or not. He thought, okay, these events are really scary. They're lining up with my life entirely. And so for the next 14 years of his life, he felt invincible. He was able to do things. His life is fascinating. It is a testament to what you can do with your life when you think, no, the next, like, I'm invincible. That's really what is at the core of this, is that death is not the end for these people. At the end is another beginning. How much more liberating is that than the whole, we are just an automated flesh pod that when you die, that's it? Don't you think that you'll be able to accomplish a hell of a lot more? Don't you think that you'd be a hell of a lot more forgiving of things that happen to you in your day-to-day life if that was your psychological outlook? Well, I'll tell you right now, something that is proven to make you do well in the thing that people are more scared of than death, public speaking. This is proven. Write this down. If you abdicate how you are going to do on stage to a higher power, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's God, the universe, whatever. If you abdicate yourself to that, guess what? The respondents of the speech think it's way better. You think that you did way better. When you look at someone on camera, when they say to the person before, when they go on stage, abdicate it to an outside responsibility, and then when they say to the other one, it's all on you, buddy. Go out there, knock them dead. That person starts floundering. When it's up to them, they are weaker. When it is out there with this grand plan, and there is a bunch of unknowns that we don't know about, but at the end of the day, it's probably going to end up being really good, you do amazingly well. I'm not necessarily saying to you, you need to trick yourself into this. What I am saying is that there probably is some sort of spirituality on some level that you have. And it's probably a good idea to write down to what extent that is for you. Obviously, this is going to be very personal for everybody out there. And everybody is going to have a different, this is what happens when you die. I'm not even telling you, like, this is what happens when you die. I'm just talking about in your day-to-day life. Do you feel like you are being guided in a certain direction or not? Because it seems like, over and over again, the people who think, I'm being guided by a force, end up being far more forceful in life, end up doing far more. You know, Einstein, his biggest, most important quote, it's definitely not his biggest quote, his most important quote, I think, is the most important question that anybody can ask themselves is this universe a good universe or a bad universe? In other words, is the universe conspiring to help you out? And that seems to completely change people's psychology. It makes people feel like, this is the other thing. Why are you always abdicating to a higher power in Alcoholics Anonymous? Because when it's up to you, you always feel like, I'm weak, I can't do this. If it's up to God, then God is powerful and he can take it off you. Do you understand how powerful this is? I hope so. I hope you also sign up to Jordan Shanks, because we talk about things that are a little less namby-pamby than that there. And we do talk about ways that are absolutely guaranteed to get you to get more results. In fact, that does in itself. When you start thinking that you are guided by something, that you are guided by a bigger force, watch how you rise to the occasion. Watch how you rise to the occasion. But behind closed doors, we're talking more about, okay, so this is scientifically what happens. This is the best amount of sleep. We're talking about these things. And the reason that we do talk about it behind that is because this whole channel is about making more effective citizens. People that actually go out and contribute and make a difference in the world while enriching themselves, while having better lives, far more effective lives. That's what self-help is. It is the study of getting you to do what you want to do more. Because I feel like a lot of the time, a lot of people want to be doing things and then they don't. They never do. We're here to stop that. Sign up. It is honestly the best investment that you could ever make in your life. It is the price of a coffee. And you are, as a result of that, getting a bunch of information pumped into you daily of, hey, you're capable of more. You can do more. And I believe in you.